What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone, we got Nick from Elder. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So, your new full-length album is Omens, which is scheduled to come out later this year. Do you consider this just a follow-up to your last full-length album, Reflections of a Floating World, or do you think that this kind of stands out a little bit more in the Elder catalog?
I definitely think that in the catalog, this is a different beast. It stands a little bit, to a different side from the last record, whereas Reflections really felt after we finished making it kind of like a follow-up to Lore, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. Omens has definitely got a different sound altogether, from production and songwriting. So, yeah, no, it's a new step for sure.
Yeah. Well, this could just, maybe this is just me figuring this out, just being, a fan of the band. But, I could tell, what song will be off of Lore or what's off Reflections and even this new album. It's fair to say you guys always take a new approach to everything, right?
Yeah, we try our best.
Mm-hmm. Do you, go into the songwriting process with, a preconceived idea of how you want something to sound? Or is there, a lot of improvising and going with the flow?
No. When we're starting to make songs, there's never really any idea, or very, very rarely an idea of exactly what kind of, vibe we're going for, what kind of song is going to become. Oftentimes when, a part, just materializes and we've got, an idea, the rest will just kind of take off running. Or it could be, painful revision over a year straight. So there's really no way of saying this is how we work. It's just kind of always ad hoc and always changing too.
Yeah. Now, the first single off of Omens is Ember, correct?
Yeah, Embers, yep.
Yep. Can this maybe, serve as a clear indication, on what Omens or, Halcyon or One Light Retreating could be? Or is this just maybe, the tip of the iceberg of Omens?
I think it's definitely the most out there track in terms of melody and just we intentionally kind of.
Oh, hello.
We intentionally chose this song that was a little more provocative because it's definitely got the least heavy riffs and that kind of shit. The furthest away from the stoner rock and the doom tags that we've been trying to shake off for a couple years now. But the album is pretty varied. I wouldn't say it's necessarily indicative of the rest of it. I think I think people are going to have a lot to discover that sounds pretty different from that song, and some that sound similar.
Yeah. Well,
but in general, definitely experimental, psychedelic, heavy on the melody. But yeah, no, that's not a complete indicator of how the album sounds as a whole.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned stoner, psychedelic, doom. I've always said that Elder is a fairly experimental band. So I mean, trying new things has never been an issue for you, right? It's never been too difficult, right?
Nah. I mean, aside from some, mental hurdles, people like you because you play a certain kind of music, and at a certain point, it does become a little bit difficult to consciously get over that and just say, you appreciate people liking what you've done in the past, but you need to do what you want to do as a whole.
Yeah. I think in the end, obviously, fans will love you for your back catalog and, stuff that they discovered you on. But I think in the end, if you're true to who you are, I think that's what will make fans respect you, right?
I think a lot of people do think that way, and we do have a lot of really cool fans who have that approach. I just try not to spend too much time getting mired in comments on YouTube and social media, because there's definitely a lot of narrow-minded people out there too.
Yeah, of course. Just when you think that there's only good people in the world, read YouTube comments, right?
Yeah, well, just when you think, I don't know, but
yeah. Now, when it comes to the entirety of your catalog, is it almost kind of whether it's your self-titled or Lore or anything like that, is it almost representative of who you and the rest of the band were at that particular time? Or are you kind of expressing something completely outside of who you are?
That's a good question. To a certain extent, yeah, of course. The self-titled, it's got all these lyrics about Conan the Barbarian and stuff, and that was very much indicative of where my headspace was at as an 18-year-old. That obviously, I think the seriousness of life and responsibility and being an adult the penny hadn't dropped there quite yet. So, and the albums are getting a little heavier in terms of like, you know, themes and moods in general. So I think that does reflect to a certain degree who we are, but I definitely haven't listened to, like, you know, metal or heavy music super seriously for a couple years now. So in that case, what we do definitely exists a little bit outside of our own personalities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I know that, like, you know, you guys do tackle into subject matters like philosophy or, you know, methodology and all that stuff. Do you kind of, like, look for inspiration? Like, do you have to kind of, like, you know, do research involved, or does ideas or sometimes just come out of the blue?
The past couple years, the ideas have just kind of presented themselves because it feels like we're living in a really, you know, tumultuous, kind of fucked up world that's just getting bleaker. And I find it hard to make music that's not somehow, you know, influenced by this, if not obsessed with this idea. But previous albums definitely, it's more like just whatever you're reading or consuming or thinking about could end up being a source of inspiration for any song at the end of the day. Usually don't have to go looking too hard, just kind of observing and thinking about what's going on in your own mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that's interesting because when you, like, are doing research, you know, you're reading stuff, or, you know, you're kind of like, you know, making art come out of art in a certain way. But is there, and we kind of just answered it a little bit, but is there any, like, personal investment into the music as well when you're doing research for music?
Can you rephrase that? I'm not sure I fully understood.
Yeah. So, like, I interviewed a band that sings a lot about politics, right? And they and I asked, like, is there research conducted in this, or when it comes to political music, is it your own, like, personal investment in it? So, like, for you, when you're doing research, is there also personal, like, ideologies or personal experiences that you invest into the music as well? Or are you just strictly, like, looking at literature and philosophy and everything else to bring into the art?
Actually, I would say there's very little actually personally invested in our music, especially when it comes to, like, you know, the songs or the albums that think a lot about, I don't know, or ponder on some, like, philosophical life and death questions. I think the interesting thing is ruminating on things that have a general human appeal, that they don't focus on the me and my own personal experiences as, like, one tiny human being. I think it's cool to read books and consume art that's timeless because it deals with very, you know, basic human themes that can relate to everyone, and it's nice to have topics in music too that relate on a human level, not just, like, you know, narcissistic pop music where it's about, you know, you and your fucking girlfriend or whatever. So I try to keep me and my own pissant existence out of the music's lyrics as much as possible.
That's interesting. So when you like execute this material live, or even when you're recording, do you almost in a way kind of like portray a character, since you kind of keep your personal life out of it?
I mean, there's very few songs in our catalog that are really that narrative where I have to think about it, and a lot of the lyrics are kind of, you know, intentionally abstracted. So it's not really like I have to get myself out of anything. No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. When it comes to, like, the process for writing lyrics, do you need to hear the music in order to come up with, like, the arrangement for lyrics, or could, like, maybe the concept that you want to write about determine the outcome of the composition of the music itself?
I would really love, honestly, that would be an experiment for my own songwriting to try. It would be to finally make lyrics before the music, because actually it's always just, we've got the songs written, and those kind of, those inspire lyrics often, or, you know, finding we've got some lyrics written but need to tailor them to the music specifically. Those are always kind of the last piece of every puzzle, and maybe there's, like, a rough idea for a theme as the music's being composed, but very seldom are there, like, a full song's worth of lyrics written before we even start with a song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing could be more heartbreaking, though, than writing, like, the best lyrics and then seeing how they go, like, one syllable over or under the arrangements and they don't fit, right? I'd imagine that's happened before.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that going on when working on the songs and lyrics for Omens, and that entering the last phase of the songwriting, where I had some lyrics that just, or, you know, complete verses that got scrapped entirely, or ideas that just somehow it didn't fit rhythmically at all with the music.
Yeah.
But it happens. There's definitely a huge riff graveyard on my hard drive of song ideas that never made the cut either. So you know.
Yeah, I've always said that needs to be like a thing where like every hard drive that a musician ever owns should just be put in a library one day if they allow it, and then just people could go in and see the forgotten riffs or something like that, like the forgotten riff library.
Yeah, I think about doing something with this every once in a while if it doesn't come to the library, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, you ever worried that like the stuff you leave out could be a B-side one day, just be the biggest hit you guys ever had?
I often worry that just in my disorganized hard drive that's got tons of Logic files. I don't know if you do like home recording. That's just like the program I use to make demos. I just worry that I'm overlooking something from years back that's like a really killer riff. Oh yeah, I'll come back to this. I'll use this in a song. It's gonna sit there dusty and never again to be seen.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to, the overall songwriting, do you find it easier to maybe come up with ideas or, come up with arrangements when you're kind of like alone in isolation? Or do you find it easier to come up with ideas when you're accompanied by Jack and Mike and George and everybody?
I find it a lot easier to write in isolation, like to the point where I'm not sure if that's just because that's how I've been working the past couple of years out of necessity, and now I find it very hard to be social in music again. But for me to like really flesh out an idea, that doesn't ever happen hardly through jamming. I find it distracting because it's sometimes you might be on the same level when everyone's working for the same goal, but oftentimes it feels like you're just distracting each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and isolation, I mean, in the realm of rock and metal, I mean, isolation almost seems like the greatest fuel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially I think if you're making kind of complicated or a little progressive music, it's not easy to just jam on that and expect that that's going to work itself out. It's kind of, sometimes you really have to put the pen to the paper, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see during the whole situation that we're currently in what music comes out in the next couple months or year.
Oh yeah, same. I'm hoping that everyone who can is taking the time off, if they have it, to be productive,
Yeah, of course. It's the only thing you can do. And
very much.
Yep. And I have two more questions for you. You ready for the most difficult question in the interview?
Sure.
All right. How do you know when a song is done?
That is, it's kind of like one of those stupid things where you can always like add another brushstroke to a painting or whatever. You can always find something else to add, but usually there's a moment where it feels like, oh, okay, like good. This song like has said everything it needs to say, and like that's the good beginning, middle, and end. Just when we're looking over the songs that are in like 75 or 80% completed state, it's pretty glaring, or it's pretty obvious, like if there's something that needs to be changed, at least to me, and you just get a feeling when it's finished.
Yeah.
Which in retrospect, I look back at some other songs and always think like, maybe this one wasn't quite finished, or like, oh, maybe that should have been changed. But at a certain point, you just got to call it too. Can't be making half-hour long songs.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I remember somebody told me that they were like a half hour late for Opeth's set, who recently played here, and they said they made it before the first chorus. So, yeah, sometimes it works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, because I feel like your music does, in a way, like capture a moment too. So I feel like if that's kind of your goal, to capture a moment, I feel like the longer you work on something, that it's harder to maintain that, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent, for sure. I don't know, like, why but it's not intentional that all the songs end up being around 10 minutes long. It's not a benchmark that we set for ourselves. It just kind of fucking happens. That seems to be like the general amount of time it takes for an idea to feel finished. Mm-hmm.
Of course. And the final question I wanted to ask you is, we talked about songwriting and recording, all that stuff. Now, when it comes to playing your material live, is there maybe a similar energy that you put into your live presence as you do when you're songwriting, or is it like a separate art altogether?
I would say it's much different, and it's much more energetic, and that, like, I think it's kind of like the flip side of the coin. It's a very meditative thing and very intensive and very, like, laborious process to write the music, and playing it live is kind of like where release of everything. It's loud, it's energetic, it's euphoric, and it just it feels like the music that we have written and recorded is just set free in a certain way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, crowd interaction also, like, with the audience reaction, maybe like enhances your sound in a way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You reverberate off each other. And having the music played at 130 decibels doesn't hurt either.
Definitely, definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks to you.
Of course. I wasn't sure. Is your your May tour still happening so far, or did Corona attack that one too?
At the moment, we're really still just kind of talking to promoters and feeling our way through it. We haven't canceled anything or postponed anything at the moment, but I would say it's highly likely that we're looking at disruptions through May and hopefully not further. But we'll keep everyone posted online to the best of our ability.
Okay, so aside from that, tour that's up in the air, is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the album?
If anyone wants to pre-order the record, listeners in European Union and beyond can order it from Stickman Records. People in the States or North America can grab it from Armageddon Shop. And otherwise, we're dropping it on April 24th. And anyone who doesn't want to buy it is free to listen to it on any streaming service. And hopefully everyone stays healthy and we'll see each other on the other side of this fucking mess.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Nick. Everybody, Nick of Elder Omens out April 24th. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.